said, I'm really struggling getting in there. And he said, have you ever paid a therapist to hear you? And I said, yeah, it's a lot of money. And I don't really ever like what they have to say. And he's like, it's what a confession is, but it's cheaper.
Welcome to Voices of Conversion. Episode 2 is here, and I am so excited to introduce you to our first guest, Cheryl Barnard. Cheryl is the executive director of a Better Choice Pregnancy Resource Center in Wichita, Kansas. She is also a certified Catholic life coach. I am so excited to bring her onto the show today to talk about her reversion to the Catholic faith after suffering through 2 abortions. God has brought Cheryl through so many different struggles and triumphs in her life. And she is a wonderful, godly woman that I look to as an example of faithfulness to Christ through pain and wounds. And she has shown me that true healing can only come through Jesus Christ. A note to the listener, if you have been hurt by abortion, my prayer is that this episode will bring you a step closer to healing and peace. Ultimately, the only peace we will find is in Jesus Christ. And my prayer is that you listen to Cheryl's story today. I know this is a sensitive issue for many women and men because abortion has impacted millions of men and women across the world. You are never too far gone. You are never too far from Christ. All we have to do is be open to his mercy, his grace, and his healing. Without further ado, please welcome Cheryl Barnard. Welcome to Voices of Conversion.
Thank you, Addie. Thank you for having me. This is exciting. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I am very excited to have you here today. And thank you so much for being the first guest on the podcast.
So much pressure, Addie.
I know. Yes, yeah, there is a little bit of pressure, but it's good that we're already friends and we know each
Yeah.
other, so that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off for me at least.
For sure.
Let's get started. So, what was your life like growing up?
Growing up, I was cradle Catholic, and I was the baby of 5 kids, but in that dynamic, because of the age differences, I was really more of an only child. And so grew up in a very small town. Family was everywhere. Went to church every Sunday. My mom and dad happily married. If I remember right, I think they made it to their 44th anniversary. 45th, my dad had passed right before. So really a close-knit family of extended family, small German family that were all Catholic. I thought everybody was Catholic growing up. I didn't know why people down the street didn't go to our Catholic church on Sundays, but because most everybody was there. And so just raised in a great family, small community, 1,200 people. I think it's down to 600 now. But yeah.
So, your faith journey, you grew up in the Catholic faith. You had parents that loved Jesus and showed him to you in the relationship with Jesus. How did your faith grow from your time as a child into adolescence? And if there were any crises of faith, how was that for you?
Growing up in southwestern Kansas, you don't get fed spiritually like we do here in Wichita. So literally when we were fed was on Sunday mornings or Saturday night when you went to your weekly mass, and then on Wednesday when we had back then CCD. We always had older priests. We didn't have the younger priests like we do here now in Wichita. And so I knew the routine of being a Catholic, checked boxes. We all checked boxes, but didn't know exactly everything that the Catholic faith provided. for us. I don't know that my mom even knew all that it provided. And if she did, she didn't tell me. My dad was a convert, and so he just kind of went with the flow. And I honestly, up until I was in college, I didn't even know that my dad was Catholic because he never went to receive Jesus. So he never went up to receive the Eucharist. So that was that he showed up, he was there. So growing up in southwestern Kansas, it was just a time together. It was a community time. It wasn't really a spiritual fed time.
Mm.
And then through my confirmation, I didn't really understand what confirmation was. I thought it was just another checkbox that we're marking. There's one more thing that we do as Catholics. Didn't really fully understand it. And after that, I was 16. And then that's kind of when everything shifted. And so with not having that strong spiritual fed faith and not really living out the faith, just going with the flow, I got lost.
And what did that being lost, what did that look like for you?
It was lonely. And it was also lonely, as I've done my self-discovery, that loneliness started a lot earlier in my life, and when I see bigger families now and have a child has so much of an age difference like I did, when those grandkids come, that last child kind of gets left. And it's not anybody's fault. My parents still loved me, and I knew that. My siblings still loved me. But who can resist babies?
Right.
Nobody wants to deal with a fourth grader, that's hormonal and full of attitude, right? And so once confirmation hit, and in high school, I had an incident that happened to me that I didn't know how to handle. And I didn't know that I could reach out to my family for help without creating more chaos. Coming from a bigger family and a very stubborn German family, everybody has their opinions. And they're loud and clear. And there was always chaos with kids and grandkids. And there's always just chaos, which I thought that's what families were supposed to have. And there is still chaos in our family today, right? Even though we follow Jesus so closely, but it's a different kind of chaos. There's still peace in it. And so when I was a week before my 16th birthday, I was testing the waters and went to a party, and it wasn't the first big scary thing that happened to me, but it was the first physical scary thing that happened to me. And I was raped, and I didn't know how to share it. And so at that point, I did everything I could to protect myself. And I didn't believe that Jesus was there, because why would this man who I've been told would protect me, didn't protect me. And so I started questioning God, and I didn't have anybody to go to with those questions. The priest there in my small town, they weren't very open, right? Like, then there was some problems in our home church with priest, and where it created a lot of chaos. Adults found pornography in trash cans. And so then seeing this priest who I did like, and they finally brought in a priest that would help us kids, then this happened. And then I got raped, and then I got propositioned by a cop, and then. And so it all starts in family, and our family is our priest too. And so that's where the disconnect really started.
I understand that a lot from my own childhood as well, which I have not gotten into on the podcast yet.
Yeah.
But those times of being sexually abused really do break us, especially when we're children. It can shatter your identity. In my experience, it shattered my self-worth and self-image.
Yeah.
And that feeling of, it's almost worse than what I would imagine it would be to die. because when you die, you get to go be with the Lord.
Yeah.
You're in the state of grace, but you're living in your and just this feeling of and I'll speak from my experience, this feeling of
Mhm.
disgust. And even though you did not sin, you feel dirty and you
Yeah.
feel gross and you feel, and then not having an adult to go to in those times of, you just wish you didn't have to live like that anymore,
Mhm.
wanting to break free of that. And then being a child too, being 15, I'm sure in your experience as well that you didn't have the words or the means to process those emotions. How was that for you, processing or attempting to process and come out of that darkness? Did it take a different turn in your life? Was that kind of a catalyst for you of just delving into desperation and
Mhm.
loneliness and time away from God? What
Mhm.
did that low point, what was that like for you emotionally and spiritually?
Yeah, emotionally, it just shut me out, right? And I became a completely different person. I became colder, harder. My skin became very, very thick. I became hurtful. I would do whatever I could to hurt other people before they could hurt me. And with words, with actions, with whatever, with gossip. And spiritually, it was non-existent at that point. Because growing up, and today still, we hear what we should be doing. We read it out of the Bible in the way we should be acting. But we see as little kids our older siblings living outside of marriage, having babies outside of marriage. And that doesn't make them bad. It just makes it confusing for
Mhm.
younger kids who, well, if they can do it, are they going to go to hell? No, they're still good people. And as kids, you understand that. But then when you start doing those acts, or when that happens to you, you get really confused. And I think in my mind, it was, well, if I'm going to hell, let's have a good time.
It's a very hard place to be, and the devil definitely uses
Hmm.
that. If God already doesn't love me, then I
Yeah.
might as well just go out with a party.
Hmm.
I mean, and that is a very low place to be.
Yeah. And so then I turned to alcohol, tried weed here and there, but it wasn't for me. Alcohol was my vice and sex was my vice. Those are the two things that numbed all the pain.
How long were you in this period from 15? How long were you in this numbing the pain? How long did that go? And that distance from God and that feeling of, well, I'm just gonna have a party till it's over, basically. How long did
Hmm.
that go on for you?
Until I was probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it started like fading away a little bit in my mid 30s, early to mid 30s. But 10 years ago, when I was 37, when I came back to the church, that's when the healing began. That's when the self discovery started. And that's when the spiritual identity started.
Well, that's a beautiful thing to
Yeah.
have this spiritual identity in Christ. And 10 years ago, with that, the life before Christ and this brokenness and just emotional isolation and this loneliness that you experienced, what was the catalyst that brought you back to Christ and his church after being raised Catholic, but maybe not catechized well, like you
Hmm.
said, and maybe not having this spiritual fullness and
Yeah.
community that we're very blessed with here in our diocese? What was it that drew you back to Christ?
My mom, my dad passed away, and then 4 years later, my mom. And during my mom's funeral, I had gotten a message from a friend of mine that I worked with that I was no longer needed in the company. And at that point, my husband had been laid off, school teacher for 3 years, subbing when he could. I was the working adult in the house that worked full time. I did anything and everything I could to climb the retail corporate ladder of multiple big box companies, and I did. And I went, to work for a small company and for a friend, and it failed. We had 5 mouths to feed, and then 7 counting hours. I was already at the point where I was trying to find a way out of my marriage. I was trying to find a way out of being a parent. I was trying to get my husband to understand that the kids were better if he stayed in the home and he was the parent and I left. And he just wouldn't hear it. And he left for a couple months, went back to New Jersey and, did what he could to make some cash as a caddy. And out there, you make good money as a caddy, which put him through high school and college. So it was something he already knew about and had connections. And he had recently, at that time, had just gotten a job with 259. And so, financially, things were looking okay. But he also knew that I needed time off because I was going nuts. So I stayed home that summer, and my mother, God rest her soul, before she passed, she would always tell me, Cheryl, you need to go back to church. Your kids really need church. And I would repeatedly tell her, Mom, I know. And when I find the right church for my family, and when I have the time, we will. And it's not the Catholic Church, Mom. It's just not for me. We can't do that. That's not for my family. And just every time she was on the phone with me or, in person, it was that conversation to where it just annoyed the heck out of me. And then she died. And then 3 Sundays in a row, 4-year-old Jordan, 5-year-old Jasmine would come upstairs and they would say, Grandma says it's Sunday, we need to go to Mass. And I'm like, Grandma's dead. She didn't say that. Yes, she did. And finally, that 3rd Sunday, I'm just like, okay. So I send my husband a text message, and he's, in New Jersey. And I said, okay, the only thing we haven't tried to save our marriage or our family is church. And I gave him a lovely list of churches to choose from because he was raised Baptist, but his church faith, his church attendance wasn't like me growing up. So I wanted him to be comfortable and be able to choose, right? And I gave him some good list of churches that have great bands, great coffee, comfortable theater seating, those kind. And he said, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. And why don't you reach out to your sister and see what we need to do to join St. Thomas? No Catholic churches on the list. You don't just knock on the door and say, hi, I want to be Catholic. There's a process, buddy. And I don't know if I'm allowed back. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, I need to ask some questions before I know that it's safe for me to go back.
So what were those questions and why? So why did you not feel like you could go back to the Catholic Church? And what were those questions that you had before going back?
Yeah, so the reason I didn't think I could go back, the sins that I made, I was definitely going to hell, having 2 abortions, one at 12 weeks, one at 21 weeks, I think, probably a little later, now that I'm really starting to dig deeper into that recollection. Promiscuous sex, drinking, cussing, all of the above. I mean, like I said, I was going to hell, so I was going to have a good time. And, and I did. And I'm not going to say I didn't. It was a good time, but a good time always has to come to an end with reality and with consequences. A few questions was like, okay, so my husband and I we're married. We got married in the Newark, New Jersey courthouse.
Very romantic place.
Very romantic, girl. We did a rushed marriage after knowing each other for 3 months. And because I was pregnant and he had good insurance. And our honeymoon was right after that to the first prenatal appointment. Dropped his mom off at home because she was a witness, and so was his brother, and then we went to a doctor's appointment. You just can't make this up. So it was, those questions of, is there any reason why anybody could not come back to the faith? I didn't come out and confess on the phone. It was a seminarian that was talking to me. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't even know what a seminarian was at that point. And he was like, no. And I said, okay, what's the worst thing I could do to keep me from coming back to the faith? And he was like, nothing. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Like, if I were to kill somebody, would I be able to come back? And he was like, yeah, you can. And I was like, what? This is different than what I portrayed when I was younger. And I was like, okay, so my Baptist husband, him and I were already married, and you're not mad about that? And he was like, no. I was like, oh, okay. Well, we already have children. He has a child from a previous marriage. Like, tell me no at some point. And he just didn't. And he said, just come to the classes and just listen. And you'll know if it's for you or not. And so I said, okay, we'll give it a whirl. I honestly thought that my husband, and at that time our son, joined as well at the same time. And I thought, these guys aren't going to stick through it. There's no way. They're going to be bored. They're going to say, it's not for me. I was like, prove me wrong. And they proved me wrong.
So how was the first class? And I'm assuming this was RCIA you went to.
Yeah.
And how was that? What was that experience like for you and your husband and your son?
I was nervous, and I was looking for anything, I'm sure I was like this, my arms crossed. I'm sure I had lots of attitude and you're wrong, this is the right thing, that kind of stuff. But, Bill enjoyed the wine and the snacks. Elijah, there was a few younger kids joining at the same time, and so that helped. And my brother-in-law came with us. That helped too. He was Elijah's sponsor, so that was great. And at the end of the day, it was a God moment, because my husband chose cousins of my mother to be his sponsor and godparents. And the day that, Easter of 2015, they recollected, they were like, we looked through the paperwork and we were your dad's godparents.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, so cool.
That is so cool.
So yeah, there's always those God winks there.
Yes. Yes. I truly believe that God is always speaking to us. We just aren't listening a lot of the times. And moments like that, and your father was already passed away by the time you had gone to RCIA. So it may have been his intercession that brought his godparents to be the godparents of your husband.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Which is beautiful. Yeah.
And you had no idea till you got there.
No idea. No clue at all.
Wow.
So
that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. So when you walked into RCIA classes, which is the Rite of Initiation for Christian Adults, right?
Yes.
I believe that's what it is. Now it's OCIA.
Now it's OCIA, and I don't know what that is.
Me neither. I have no idea. Yeah. So when you walked into classes for conversion, were you all in on Jesus, or were you apprehensive to Jesus Christ, or were you sold on Jesus but not the Catholic Church? Like, where were you relationship-wise with God? Were you just doing this because your daughters wanted to go to church? Where were you spiritually?
So spiritually, I was ready for that relationship, that conversation to start again with Jesus. And Catholic Church, I was still set on dead no. We had Father Matt McGinnis, and he's still there. And I love that man. And I just remember even, and this is crazy to even say this with what I do now, but even coming back in and going through that RCI classes, I was buying in to a lot of things, but I was still holding conviction on the things that I believed, that the Catholic Church was like dead set. That's a no. And so I was fighting with that. And Father Matt had great conversations with me on that. And, sitting in the pews and hearing about, abortion, I just remember standing there rolling my eyes and saying, oh God, these judgy people, here we go. They don't understand. They don't understand why people get abortions. They don't, they're not my people. And I just remember fighting with that and thinking, how can I live out this faith that they're asking me to? And I was falling in love with it, but I'm still over here fighting and defending abortion. So how can I I still felt like a fraud, which is why I stopped going to mass, because I didn't want to be a fraud. I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Right. And then I finally made my way back into confession because, Father Matt, he said this simple thing to me. I said, I'm really struggling getting in there. And he said, have you ever paid a therapist to hear you? And I said, yeah, it's a lot of money. And I don't really ever like what they have to say. And he's like, it's what a confession is, but it's cheaper. He said, just give it a shot. And not that our priest or therapist, like I knew what he was saying. Yeah. So I made my way back.
Yeah, and that healing from going to confession is more healing than years of therapy. And I can attest to that myself. There's nothing that can replace the healing that Jesus Christ brings. That is only through confession. And people that may be watching today may think, well, why do I need to tell another man my sin when they're sinful too?
Mm-hmm.
And, that is something that a lot of people that are Protestant or just agnostic think, okay, that's really dumb. Okay. But there's so much healing in the fact that this priest, yes, they are a sinful person, but they are not operating as them. They're operating in the person of Christ, or in Latin, we say in persona Christi.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a healing there, and there's an anonymity there where there are things that you confess, that you tell the priest, that you work through, that no one else knows. And that's because that person is in the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it's very, very healing. So from your point of view, having that stronghold of, well, I have to be pro-choice because, and I may be assuming a lot here, but correct me if I'm wrong. If I acknowledge that abortion is wrong, I have to acknowledge my own sin, and I have to be humble before God. And that pride is something I'm very guilty of. It's the root of all sin is, well, if I acknowledge that it's a sin, then I acknowledge I'm a sinner. And that is humiliating. I mean,
it is.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I remember when I finally, I always say when I had enough balls to go in there, my language.
Yeah.
I get there and the light on Father Andy Walsh's door is lit up. Father Matt's is just dark. He's not even there. And I'm like, oh no. Father Andy was a brand new priest. He's not going to know what to say to me. I'm going to break him. I have like 17 so years of stuff that I'm supposed to say in here. And it's heavy and it's gross. And he's going to kick me out of the church. Out of a church that now my children love. They're now going to school here. My marriage, still rocky, but so much better. Yep, I'm going to screw this up again. And so I started to walk away, and I was like, God just kept me there. And finally I just went in, and it was the best moment ever. I wish I could say it was better than having my own children, and I love my children to death. But when you're not healed from an abortion, having a child is very triggering. And I wasn't able to enjoy it at that time. I wasn't able to enjoy motherhood for years. But being in that confessional just chokes me up every time. And I know this was Jesus talking to me and telling me that I was lonely for so long, and for far too long, and that he was glad that I was back.
I just got chills.
Every time.
It's beautiful.
And when I walked out of that confessional, I just had my body was just, I just had that warm sensation all through my body. My heart was on fire. And I heard him say, now go tell your story. And so Jesus and I danced for a good 7 years and trying to figure out what he meant by that, and in what platform. How am I supposed to share this? Who's going to listen? I mean, people are already telling their story, and it's the same story. And so we danced for 7 years.
After those 7 years, what did sharing this beautiful story, what did that look like for you? And how did God lead you to that, to sharing your story?
Yeah. It was during that tumultuous time in Kansas, the vote no, vote yes. And I just kept hearing Jesus say, go bigger, go louder, go bigger, go louder. Because I was already sharing. I was already working on things with my life coaching and with other post-abortive women, and doing some retreats for some small churches, and about my conversion and about my, abortions. And really, God just kept bringing women that were post-abortive to me, and in all capacities, in anything I did. And so I just kept hearing bigger, bigger. And so then I was like, okay, I hear you. I need to go and do one more thing for my healing, because I did a lot of self-work. I made a lot of changes. My family is so much better, dug deeper into my faith, but I hadn't gone to a Rachel's Vineyard weekend. And so I called Project Rachel and asked to talk, and went and made an appointment. And then I did my first retreat October of 22. And it was life-changing. It's beautiful. During that weekend, I sat with a bunch of others, sat with Father May, with my spiritual director now, Sister Joan, and, Stephanie Nemechek. I mean, it's a beautiful program that she is doing there. And that second night with the holy water, it was supposed to resemble, like our babies' baptisms and all that. And I remember Father May saying, what are those tears about? And I said, they're not even for me anymore. And they're not for Jacob and Sebastian, because I know that they're safe, and I know they're doing work up in heaven. And they're for the women that I'm supposed to serve. They're for the women that God has for me to speak to. And they're for the women that don't even know that they need to speak, and that that they don't have to go to that appointment that's scheduled on Monday. That's what those tears were for.
That's beautiful. And Jacob and Sebastian, are those the names of your babies that you lost in abortion?
Yeah. Jacob was the 12-week abortion with Dr. Tiller. And Sebastian was definitely a late term. I say 21, 22 weeks because that's the legal law. I don't know if it was further along or not, just because of my memory of really having a pretty big baby bump. And the fact that it was a 3-day process and that I had to deliver tells me that it was later than that.
There are a lot of deep wounds there that I'm sure were healed with going to Rachel's Vineyard, because delivering your baby and going through that process of naming your baby afterwards, I can imagine is very healing to have names for them and know that they are in heaven.
Yeah. And Jesus has let me see them. And, 2 little boys with their little afros playing basketball, and Jesus was there watching. And, I sit down on the bleachers and just watch them and their friends play. And I remember they told me, that they're okay and they still love me. And that they are taking care of all the kids up there.
Wow. That is a miracle.
Yeah.
To receive that vision.
Yeah. It was a blessing. It was sad to wake up from that, to come out of prayer with that. But, and I know my 16-year-old, she prays to them a lot. My 17-year-old, who knows, she's a senior in high school. So, but that's, going back to confession, just a quick story about her. She's a little bit like her mom. And her first confession, she was like, "It's none of Father Matt's business what I've done wrong. I don't know why I have to go in here." And I'm like, she ain't kidding. But this girl here, I don't know that she misses a week of going into that confession.
That's beautiful.
And and one day I think she'll share her testimony, and it's just going to be beautiful when she does.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And if my husband wouldn't have been, faithful to his family and to me and to our marriage, I don't know that we would have been able to show her that opportunity to have a testimony, which is, so my conversion it wasn't just for me. It's that trickle effect.
Yeah. Yeah. The outpouring of grace upon your entire family. There's a couple of questions I had for you, things I kind of want to touch on. So going back to your husband, his leadership and his spiritual authority, obviously he's not here to talk to us today.
Yeah.
But he wasn't raised Catholic. He was Baptist, and God put on his heart to explore the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
How did those graces from his conversion affect your marriage and affect your children's relationship with God?
Mm-hmm. He's not perfect in the Catholic faith, but who is? There's a lot of rules. But there's also a lot of, the rules make sense when you can ask why, when you have that priest that answers the why. And that's one thing Father Matt does for Bill. Bill is very factual. And that's one reason why he really pushed for me to get our kids into the Catholic faith and into the Catholic schools here, because he's a research guy. And the research he did, he was like, they have a book on everything. They can back up everything they say. He's like, nobody else can. So with that, he made me a better Catholic because we didn't miss a Sunday. Growing up, if we missed a Sunday, we missed a Sunday. I didn't know that I was, jeopardizing my soul. I just thought we were out of town. You can miss a Sunday. And even when we're out of town, he'll be like, what mass are we going to? And our kids hear that. And my kids are teenagers, and I don't know how God has blessed me, but they even say, which mass are we going to? It's not, do I have to go to mass?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And we don't always go to the same mass. Sometimes they like to go to Magdalene on Sunday because they want to go to confession. And Bill and I will go to St. Thomas, or we like to go into WSU. And, it's beautiful.
That's one beautiful thing about the Catholic faith that I love, is that no matter where you are in the world, you can worship God in any language. We've had the opportunity, my husband and I, whenever we're traveling, even if it's somewhere that doesn't speak English, the Catholic faith is universal, and there's always an opportunity to go and give thanks to God.
Yep.
And that's just a wonderful blessing that your children on those holy days want to go, and they want to go and worship God. And that's such a beautiful thing. And that your husband was led through that factual aspect of the Catholic faith, that intellectual conversion, if you will, of just, these rules. A lot of people from the outside do see them as rules, but it's rubrics for loving God, how God asks for us to love him. And that's beautiful that your husband saw it in that way, and that had that trickle effect on you and your children. And that is such a beautiful thing. I was very curious to see how, that impact of his conversion and was a catalyst for your whole family.
Yeah. And I mean, he doesn't know it yet, but I see one of his, charisms is definitely intercessory prayer, which is crazy, right? That this man from Newark, New Jersey, who I say only went to church when he thought Whitney Houston was in town, because that's the church they went to.
Oh.
But anytime I ask him to pray for something, if I am having one of those attackful days, once I ask him to pray, within minutes, I'm feeling the Holy Spirit just coming in and swarming in, and, my angels just coming. And so he doesn't know this yet, but he's going to find out what his charism is this weekend.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. Are you all going to an event?
No, I have the program, so we're going to do it here.
Oh,
we're going to do a date
wonderful.
night. So
Oh, that's a wonderful date night. That is so wonderful. And, there is something about, I was speaking to my husband about this last night, was we've been undergoing some spiritual attacks with the podcast, actually.
Sure.
And my husband has been my number one supporter in this. I just asked him last night, I was like, can you bless us, like bless me and the kids and pray over us? Because there is a true spiritual authority that husbands and fathers have that we as women do not have. I mean, we have the blessing and the ability to bring life into the world and bring souls into the world, but husbands and fathers, they have this unique authority from God, which is a beautiful thing. It's not a patriarchal thing. It's a beautiful thing where their blessings and their prayers are just very effective in covering their families and their wives. And I've had a firsthand experience with that with my husband yesterday. He blessed us and prayed over us because we were having some spiritual attacks. And it's just that immediate sense of peace. And it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It is. They're more powerful than we give them credit for on most dates.
Yes. Yes, that is so true. And that is just another reason why it's so important to have the same love for God and the same unity in Christ in your marriage, because when that is strong, husbands have this ability to just bring that strength into the relationship and into the family.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And during that unhealed time in our marriage, I didn't allow him to do that. That I was part of that feminist movement that really messed our society up, in thinking that in order to be a successful woman, I have to be the breadwinner. I have to run the house. I have to do this. I. I remember in Mask when we first came back and, talking about that submission, and I would just, why are we still talking about the wife has to be submissive to the husband? And oh, it just irritated me as much as the word get rid of abortion. But now it's like, yeah. And I let him know, I need you to step up and lead more today. And for me to ask for that it would have been unheard of 10, 15 years ago.
Well, that's a beautiful thing that Christ has moved through you in this way. And a lot of people forget when we recoil at the wives be submissive to your husbands, the second
Mhm.
half of the verse is, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church.
Yeah,
And what did Christ do for the church? He died for us.
right. But, us that are consumed with our own sins, we're too busy pointing our fingers at other people doing the same thing, and we don't hear everything. We just hear what's attacking us.
Yes. And that living in that fight or flight, which I myself lived in for years, I also am a former feminist.
Yeah.
Um, you want, it's a defense mechanism, when you have been abused by men,
Yeah.
when all you know is abuse, at least in my case, I said, well, I'm a feminist, a woman can do
Yeah.
anything a man can do. Just so I wouldn't be attacked, I was on the defense, and
Yep.
I feel that, as someone who used to identify as a
Mhm.
feminist, and there is healing in letting go of that control and realizing that there is a beauty in the difference between men and women, and we're not supposed to be the same.
There is. And, when I started my self-discovery and started writing about my life, I reached out to some guys that I dated and asked them, who was I back then? And consistently, they said, you were hurt and you didn't allow you wouldn't allow me to love you.
Mm.
And, and my husband, I didn't allow him to love me either in our marriage, in our relationship. I didn't allow my kids to love me. I didn't allow anybody to love me, including myself. Those things that we don't give to Jesus, when they happen, they affect every part of your life. And it's not just in that moment. It's not just those people that are there during that moment. It's generations after.
Yes. Yes, and having those, some people I've heard referred to them as generational curses or
Mm-hmm.
generational sins. Breaking those is so important, and I, in my own life, have gone through breaking those generational sins and
Mm-hmm.
generational curses, which I maybe in a later episode would go into that with the
Yeah.
viewers of the podcast. But going back to these wounds that you had and from an adolescent and teenager and then going through the 2 abortions, those wounds were deep
Mm-hmm.
and those wounds were life altering. And then Christ came into your life and the sacrament of confession healed you. How were your wounds healed? For an audience member who may be going through this, who may be, suffering the grief of an abortion,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a grief there.
Mm-hmm.
I think our society wants to villainize women who do this thing, but a lot of times there's coercion
Yep.
and guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of that. And I want to know if you want to go into that, if you feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable talking about how your wounds from that were healed through Christ, and just speaking to that woman or the man who has been hurt by this, and maybe they feel like they could never go back to Christ. Would never be able to be a Catholic because of the things that they've been through. What would you say to them, and how were you healed?
Listen, confession was the first step. The second step is forgiving yourself, because you're still not, it's not as easy as Jesus is going to forgive me. If I do this, Jesus will forgive me. We hear that a lot at the center, right? No, it's not that easy, because you still have to go through a process. You still have to do work. Jesus doesn't call us just to pray. He calls us to do work as well. And so it was building that relationship with him and I, in that dancing, I call it, with him, and discovering who I was through his eyes, to where I could finally forgive myself And it was a very powerful book that we were doing at Project Rachel. We meet once a month in the fall, winter, and spring. We do Bible studies. And this one comment in this study said, if you can't forgive yourself, but Jesus has, you're putting yourself above him. You're saying his forgiveness isn't enough.
Wow.
Yeah. It was huge. It was just aha. And so I really took that to prayer. And there's some days that I revert back into that. How could I have done that? Why did I do that? Right? But then I instantly have to remind myself and go into prayer, because that's Satan working on me. That has already been done. But that full healing isn't going to happen until I see him. So until then, I continue to peel back the onion and do the work, share my story, and be there for others that need to heal. I'm finally at the point in my process here that the story I share is about who I was, but it's not my story anymore. It's his that I get to share. And that didn't happen without doing the work. And that work is looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself and having those true, honest conversations with him. Going and doing the sacraments, sitting in adoration, just being raw and real. That was when I healed the most, was my Monday nights, midnight to 1 for 3 years. I loved it when my partner wasn't there, because it was just me and the weird sounds in the middle of the night, and Jesus right there. And those were the nights that I flooded the room with tears. So it's still a lot of crying. It takes a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not for the weak. The sin is for the weak. But being on the right side with Jesus, it's hard work, but it's worth it.
Yes. And Christ is with us through all of these things.
And
yes.
He was right beside me. He knew exactly what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that free will is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he already knew before he created me what I was going to be doing today.
Yes. Yes. And one thing in my own spiritual journey that has been a constant is that Christ makes beauty out of the darkest of things.
Mm-hmm.
Christ makes beauty out of ashes, and no one is too far gone.
Right.
And there's nothing that you have done that could separate you from his love. All you have to do is say yes, and he is waiting.
For sure. We talk every day, and I love it.
Oh, I love that. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So what brings you, I guess, bringing up to today, what are you doing now? What is your life like now?
My life is crazy, full of beautiful chaos. I am a certified Catholic life coach, and I'm also executive director of A Better Choice, which is a unplanned pregnancy crisis center or resource center. I also sit on a board of a brand new women's healing ministry called Psalm 91.
Wow, wonderful. What is Psalm 91?
Oh, girl, it's beautiful. I can't wait to tell you all about it. So Psalm 91 is a women's ministry, and they combine unbound with it. And so it's unbound, forgiveness, and just figuring out what your identity is in Christ. And so it's women only, and it's led by women. And the woman that is the founder of it, Jesus put it in her heart, and she is, for a few years now, she's just praying over it. Then she reached out to me for some coaching on how to get it started, and man, off she goes. And we have our first retreat is it next weekend, which is beautiful. And then our second retreat is going to be with the Better Choice volunteers and staff, which is great. Yeah. So it's beautiful because we are working, the Unbound ministry. She's trained in that and has led so many. The Unbound is like, use it. These women need it. But what's going to be beautiful about it is once they get through this first retreat, after that, in other sessions that they will be invited to, there will be priests to pray over them as well. Because we really need to ask our fathers, our men, our priests, we've asked our husbands, we need to ask them to pray over us.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a room full of women and priests that are praying, I mean, how beautiful is that going to be? And I envision it's going to do as much for our priest as it's going to do for these women.
There's, I'm sure, a lot of healing there for the women in the ministry that you were involved in and on the board for, and just healing those wounds. I can say from my own experience, having a priest that is kind to you when you are going through a hard time, when you are expecting to receive hate, when all you've known is hatefulness, having a loving priest can just change your life and heal so many wounds. So that is such a blessing that you were doing that. And I can say from my own personal experience, I'm a former volunteer at A Better Choice and was on the board for the gala last winter when I was very big and very pregnant with my second baby. You were doing God's work over there. The women at A Better Choice, man, you guys, just yourself included, are just so wonderful. And so I'm so thankful for the work you're doing there.
Yeah. And they, as I was leaving, they were like, "Oh, have fun. Tell her we said hi."
I need to come by and say hey again soon.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question for you as we wrap up today. If you could share one piece of advice, if you could say one thing to someone that is in the place you were in your lowest point, what would you tell them?
It's the best thing that could happen. Just reaching out to the church that's local to you, right? Just reach out to them and see how they greet you on the phone, or just attend a mass and sit in the back. It's okay. And just know that if that church home that you're closest to isn't for you, that's why there's another one down the street. And just remember that our priest and our sisters, they're human too. And just like we're allowed to make mistakes, they are too. If you can sit down with one of our spiritual leaders here in Wichita or anywhere where, the listeners are listening, you'll probably see that you have more in common with that priest than you would ever imagine. But you can't grow until you become vulnerable. And I know that not every church home is a safe place to be vulnerable, but there is a church home for you that's safe for you to be vulnerable. And again, what's the best thing that could happen by you coming and learning who you are in your identity in Christ? Because it's not about that priest. It's not about that religious sister. It's about Jesus. And it's about that relationship between you and him. And you can try to do it on your own, but I've done it and it didn't work. But with community and with receiving Jesus, that's where the true love begins.
Thank you so much for sharing that. My prayer is that one person will see this and hear this podcast and that Christ will speak through you to them.
Oh, me too.
That is my hope. And I truly believe that will happen with this. So thank you so much for joining me.
It will.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'm going to link in the description of where our guests can find you with Grace and Mercy Coaching. And whether you are local to Wichita or if you are outside of Kansas, you can find Cheryl's work there. She is just a phenomenal woman with so much wisdom. And please check out her work there. And thank you so much, Cheryl. I am so happy we got to talk to you, and I'll see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Addie.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. My prayer is that Cheryl's story impacts you in a positive way and ultimately leads you to the only one who can bring us true healing, and that is Jesus Christ. I want to leave you guys today with a quote from one of my favorite saints. She used to be known as just Mother Teresa, but now we call her Saint Teresa of Calcutta. She was a champion of pro-life work and dedicated her life to it. She says, Many people are concerned with children of India, with the children of Africa, where quite a few die of hunger and so on. Many people are also concerned about the violence in this great country of the United States. These concerns are very good. But often, these same people are not concerned with the millions being killed by the deliberate decision of their own mothers. And this is the greatest destroyer of peace today: abortion, which brings people to such blindness. And my friends, we have become blind to the harm that abortion causes. I have been blessed to bring 2 children earthside, and there is a lot of fear when you are pregnant, especially when you become pregnant when you are unmarried, when you become pregnant and your financial situation is not stable. I know because I have been there myself. If you are experiencing unplanned pregnancy, there are plentiful pregnancy resource centers in your area, and I will link those resources in the description of this podcast today. You are not alone. One final thought today. The one thing that the enemy wants you to believe is that you are alone in your struggles, that no one else has experienced what you are going through. And I want you to know you are not alone. Whether you are experiencing an unplanned pregnancy, if you have been hurt by abortion, or if someone you love has gotten an abortion and you've begged them not to go through with it, all of those wounds are deeply painful. And I want you to know you are not alone in any of it. You are being prayed for actively by myself and by people like Cheryl all across this country who have dedicated their life's work to helping women see the way out before they feel like it's too late. Like I said, I'm going to be linking resources in the description below. Please know you are not alone. Until we see you next week for episode 3, stay close to Christ and may God bless you. Bye.